All right, guys, today's video is all about spike bucks. They often get a bad rap as deer that are underperforming or possible cull deer right off the bat. People want to see more than just a spike on a first year rack. Well, spikes can happen because of many reasons. You can have the best management system in the world, tens of thousands of acres, and still have spike bucks. So it's not a issue that you're causing. It's just nature's way of making it happen. So you've seen all these videos where I've been improving the plot. Multiple videos of trying to crank out protein, create more tonnage. So you would expect that now that my food plot is performing fantastically, even though this yellowing right here is no big concern. This actually happened because the material here actually grew a little too big because the heat wave lasted 2.5 weeks longer than expected, and now it's just bitten off the top. Underneath, it's really green. So I'm providing a lot of good quality tonnage here. My protein levels have went up, in my opinion, year after year. I keep adding more areas to the farm, like this area now where I have added trace minerals. But yet I just showed you a video of a spike buck that is a very small body deer that is almost comparable to a 6-month-old button buck that's been on my management program. Well, I'm going to list a few causes here, and we can try to discuss those and help you understand why a spike buck still occurs under good management conditions, or even excellent management conditions. You can do everything you want and you'll still have them. So here we go. One of the reasons that spike bucks still occur is when they are born. Sometimes it has a lot to do with that. One of the things you're going to discover is that when you're doing your management program, your young does, the fawn does, I'm talking literally their first 6 to 8 months of life, they can actually bear fawns themselves once you get them above that 65-pound weight limit on their bodies. Their hormones kick in and they can become breedable literally in their first season of life. Those deer are often bred late into the season. So around here, the normal time for fawns to be born is roughly about the 2nd week to 3rd week of June. Occasionally we get those years where it's like the 1st week of July. But when you have young does that are receptive later, and I'm talking, if you think of terms of our rut, peak rut is around Thanksgiving week. After that, it starts to decline. But there's also that secondary rut that can kick in weeks later, and we're talking even into January, where those fawn does are now breedable because they finally hit that weight threshold from all your management work. So when they have their babies, they can be born instead of, let's say, at 2nd week of June, you might find them born in August or 2nd week of August. Just depends on how late they were actually bred. Those bucks are at a disadvantage compared to the deer born in June. So they may not be nearly as developed. And yes, 2 months can make a big difference, or even 4 to 6 weeks can make a big difference in deer's bodies. So those deer may express smaller antlers, smaller bodies when it's their turn to grow their first rack, but it's not because they're genetically inferior. They're just born at an odd time. So what's another reason spike bucks can still occur? Another reason that spikes can still happen is the deer can become really sick, just like people can. You can get sick. It can set you back for weeks or months, depending on the severity of it. Also, injuries can slow down the development of deer, mess with their growth plates, and cause spike bucks to still happen. So you got three things right there that you can't really eliminate by trying to do human interference. So even if you still got the best management program, those spike bucks can still occur for those three reasons. Now, reason number 4, and most people may not think about this, but it really has to do with how well that doe can take care of babies. First-time moms are often the worst at treating babies. They don't have experience. They may not know that, hey, it's feeding time. They may skip a few of those, and it may cause those deer to be behind developmental-wise compared to your other deer. Even though you're doing this, it can still happen. So there's 4 reasons right there that you cannot control on why spike bucks can still happen. Now, there's also genetic factors. Some deer, like, are basically, they're just like people. They can be slow to develop. So that's what I call the late bloomers. So he may look like a spike one year, and then by year 2, you don't even recognize the deer because he was blown up so much that, hey, that spike's out of here. I don't see him anymore, but I got this really nice 8 or 9 point that's here, and it's really him. It's just because their bodies are genetically slower to develop than other deer. Now, deer or spikes, obviously they can vary in size. I mean, they could be barely breaking the skin. They could be 2 inches tall, 3 inches tall, 10 inches tall, 12 inches tall. It still doesn't matter how long it is. As long as those points are legally counted, you still have a spike. But some may show what appears to be better potential than others. Some are those straight up spikes like I showed you in that comparison video. Others are called cow horn spikes. They've at least developed some sort of frame that you can see that, hey, maybe if this deer can develop a little more, I can get something out of them. So you have to be prepared for no matter what you do here, do not shoot those spike bucks when you see them. You need to give those deer time to develop. For those of you that can do this, those deer need the time to develop, to recover from either their first bad year of life, poor motherhood, sickness, injuries, or maybe they're just genetically slower than other deer, or he could be that he's younger than the other bucks that are already got, 6, maybe 8 weeks of development ahead of them. So that's one of the main reasons that spikes can still occur. Now, does that mean that if you've got a field full of spikes that your management program's in trouble? Not really. I think but you should see a decline in the number of spikes, because those does that can take care of babies, the more experienced does, you'll start seeing that spike system drop off drastically, at least on the nutritional end, because she's taking care of them. So you can eliminate it through the doe's experience. Now, you can't sit here and watch deer 24/7 and go, man, that doe's doing her job. This doe over here is not doing her job. I need to cull her. She's terrible at taking care of babies. How in the world are you going to know that? I mean, it's impossible to know if she's doing a good job or bad job, other than the fact that you can see spike bucks. That's your only sign, but there's still too many factors to determine it's her fault or not. Now, here's another thing too. Spike bucks can also blow up, especially if it was because of sickness. The following year, those deer can recover, and you could see a massive blow up. So instead of seeing a deer with like 4 to 6 inch spikes, he might show maybe 80, 90 inches of antler all of a sudden. And you wouldn't recognize him because of the jump unless there is like a scar, a chunk tore out of his ear, something you can identify that deer with. High fence people put tags in their deer. They can keep watch of them that way through their number assignments they give them. But it's just luck of the draw. And if you happen to wait and don't shoot those deer their first year, let them have time to recover from that bad year. As long as you're providing good quality food, that genetic material inside of those deer are still awake. It's just this here is going to keep stimulating them. As long as they are getting their nutritional needs, they can recover from it. One of the rules that I generally do for spikes is, if it's a deer that I can recognize, I try to give it an extra year. That way I can make up for that first bad year. So let's say you have a goal to where you can actually shoot 4.5 or 5.5 year old deer, and you can pull that off with no problem if you're one of the luckier hunters. Then that means that spike buck can be shot at 6.5 or 5.5. You give him that extra year to see if he can play catch up. Because spike bucks, even though they get this bad rap of being genetically inferior deer, can become Boone and Crockett bucks, guys. Don't down yourself if you see spike bucks. Now, here's another big limiting factor, and that is people like me. I have small amounts of land. So even if I was able to do all this acreage for deer, I mean, head to toe, trace minerals, food, everything that I can provide, I'm still going to have spike bucks, even though I vastly increased the coverage of my food, because my land is my limiting factor. Over here, I can't do anything. Past this ridge, I can't do anything. Same thing with my neighbor's property up here. I can't do anything with that. That's up to him. The land that I own is my limiting factor, and it still occurs with any deer that I have here, whether it's a regular deer or not. You saw those videos of Poser, how he ended. You saw the video of Mr. Clean and how he ended. Mr. Clean was here a whole lot more than Poser was. Mr. Clean got a lot bigger than Poser. And that deer was still genetically limited because of my property. He wasn't here every day 24/7. He might have been here from a time span, let's see here. I first got him on camera in November. And let's see, that was the second week in November when he showed back up at 3.5. He stayed here until April, but he still wasn't here every day. He was here maybe 90% of the time, at night only, but daylight he's back across the ridge in places I can't help. So that deer was still limited even though he got to a really large size. Same thing with these spike bucks. No matter what I do here, my land is going to be my limiting factor. In order to see the full potential of what I'm actually doing here, I would have to own at least 1,200 acres minimum to try to get the full effect of a management program. I'm only getting maybe a third of that. It just depends on how much the deer stay here, how often, you know, how many hours can they spend in my plot? Do they spend 4 hours? Do they spend 6 hours in my plot? Those extra hours add up greatly to deer's weight and antler size. Same thing with spike bucks. No different. It's just land is a limiting factor. So don't always get angry when you see small 3-point spikes. You know, those deer still should have equal opportunity to express themselves. You can even look at my buck that I called Tank. He made 3 points. That's not impressive on the point system, but man alive, his body is screaming at me that deer is going to be a large buck. He's so much thicker. His frame's so much taller and longer, wider than any other yearling I've had. He is expressing more of my improvements here because he stayed here all the time. Now, I haven't seen him since second week of November. He's flat out disappeared, which is kind of typical around here for me. They disappear after about 1.5 years, or maybe a hair less than that, and then they may show back up at 3.5 if they've made it. So don't down those spike bucks. As long as you're doing your job here, those spike buck numbers can be reduced through good quality material, lots of tonnage, lots of food, and good harvesting practices. If you can take out an overpopulation of deer, those spike bucks can be reduced because there's more food, less mouths available. So always be on the lookout that you can do some tweaks to affect a spike's outcome, but overall they're still going to happen no matter how good you are. All right, guys, I hope you like this video, and you can kind of see the main plot here has progressed really good. So I'm actually giving deer really good food, a lot of grain, a lot of greens. I'm trying to do the best I can to pack on more weight, better antlers, and for the most part it's worked. It's just all these visiting deer that I'm seeing are the really small ones that are really out of touch with good material. So you all have a great day, and hit that like and subscribe button, guys.